Well, welcome into the post show of Operation Domination, the second edition of our post show. As a matter of fact, yep, Pat didn't stick around with us for the post show. He's a busy man. He's got better things to do. But we still had some receivers that we want to talk about that are maybe outside of our top 12 and everything else. We know how this goes. We do whatever we want in the post show, talk about whatever we want in the post show. And let's kind of start it off like we did last week, guys, with the running backs. Like we talked about like what kind of types we like. So receivers, we all got together, and I think we have three-ish categories, like with a bunch of like little notation tags kind of deal. So like you had the perimeter receivers, which to kind of Chris's point, you could be like a field stretcher, you could be a red zone guy. That kind of falls in that category. You have the versatile guys, the flanker, possession receivers, the guys who can line up inside, outside. And then you kind of have like the slot only guys with maybe like a little dash of like gadgety guys that kind of get mixed in here and with, out in space. Let's see what teams can do with them. I don't know. I mean, Adam, what type, when you're looking at the sleeper type, what's the type maybe you feel like you prefer?
When it comes to sleepers specifically, I like the slot guys a lot. The big reason for that is they're the guys who, if you look around the league, that's where the most of them, like the successful ones, like the most of them came from like late picks. Like that's just like you look around, there's not a whole lot of X's that weren't drafted super high, but you'll find your fair share of slots that came in the fourth, fifth round. Like that, is just the reality of how the league works. The other real green flag for me is ability to play special teams, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But say those just guys who are getting open, get the ball in their hands, and play a little special teams. That's what I'm looking for.
Okay. Chris, what about you?
I lean towards more the athletic guys, the field stretchers, red zone guys. They're going to have more big play opportunity. I agree with Adam though. If I'm looking for safer things and some guys for diamonds in the rough, so to speak, the slot receivers are definitely ideal. But what I'm looking for, Dan, is the big guys that have the athletics ability, but maybe can be guys that could eventually have some slot versatility. That's usually the key that makes fantasy gold for you. If you have guys who get moved around in the formations, being only a slot receiver usually limits your ability to score touchdowns. It usually limits your ability to get down the field. So you have to have a lot of possessions. You have to have a lot of guys looking for you. How offenses are being run more and more, you're seeing that third receiver have to kind of be a blocker, and he's kind of somebody who may or not be on the field consistently. So you want guys who are going to be out there. That flanker to me is that guy who's going to be out there, and if you can show that you can stretch the field, you can make some big plays in the red zone, then you can get some cheap touchdowns that can save you as the guy kind of develops his game down the road.
Big play threat's always there with that kind of guy, right? So yeah, I can understand that. Chase, you got a preference?
Yeah, actually, I prefer the versatile type. The guy that can go in or out, can play, and can get himself on the field no matter what. A guy who has that ability to play outside, stretch the field somewhat, but can also play inside, can be that kind of possession guy, can move the chains, can move the sticks kind of thing. I play in almost exclusively PPR formats. So, guys that are going to get themselves more opportunities to be on the field, more opportunities for those targets, catches are fine with me. If the guy can be a red zone threat, so much the better. If the guy can be a deep threat, so much the better. But, in terms of, taking a sleeper guy, unless there's some kind of weird way outlier, the guy's 6'5" and runs like the wind or something.
Well, how about for us, though, Chase? We're like a half point PPR. Like, what's your difference for that? Is there a difference? How about for half point PPR, like we talk about for our show? Is that something that you have a difference viewpoint?
I tend to lean into the PPR part of the half PPR because you are still scoring for points. I used to play in a league where it's a fifth of a point per catch. So but I still was that.
What's the point of that?
Every five catches was a point.
Point two, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Why bother?
But I still leaned more to guys who caught the football because every fractional point counts.
So Chase basically is saying that he doesn't care what the scoring format is. He's going to pretend it's full point PPR regardless.
No. If it's standard, I'm gonna lean more towards guys, that are gonna be more red zone threats, score more touchdowns, get more yardage. But making more catches on the field gives you, in most cases, in my opinion, it gives you more opportunities to do that.
Yeah, no,
It's a simple numbers thing.
So
I want to throw as many darts as I can.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, so I guess I get to be Goldilocks here and choose from the three little bears below me as far as which one I like the best. I'm actually with Chase as far as if I'm looking for a sleeper type, I want the guy who can play inside outside because again, that's going to get him on the field more quickly because we're talking sleepers, we're talking day 3 guys, maybe even undrafted guys. I want those guys that are going to have the opportunity. And in my experience, Adam, yes, slot guys do play quite a bit of special teams as well, but the versatile guys, like they don't have to necessarily be returners to get on the field as special teams guys and hold a roster spot that way too. So again, it's just more of that type of, are you going to earn a roster spot? And when you get on there, can you be a target earner? That guy can play inside, outside, be a possession type of guy. I mean, we've kind of seen it, right? Like Thielen was that guy. Cooper Kupp was kind of that guy, where they could play inside, outside, and it just got them to a huge target shares as a result. And they popped as wide receivers, and those guys come to mind maybe a little bit more so, at least off the top of my head, than the slot and perimeter guys do when you're talking about the late ones. Not that there isn't any, that fit those molds, but that's where I kind of lean a little bit myself. Having said all that, let's talk about little perimeter receiver sleepers that we have. Chris, that's your favorite type, so why don't we start with your sleeper?
Yeah, so my perimeter guy that I'm going to go with is Rock Taylor. Rock Taylor from Memphis, a guy who I think people kind of overlook. Ran 4.49 in Memphis. Didn't have spectacular statistics when it comes to touchdowns, but a guy who absolutely has the body to do so. 6'2", 213. He can attack all 3 levels. Got a little shake for how big he is as well. Really strong, Dan. He's got strong hands. Only had 4 drops last year. He runs hard. Had good yards per after the catch last year. The last couple of years, similar statistics last 2 years, almost close to 1,000 yards both seasons. A guy who gets 50-50 catches, and of guys who were targeted 85 times, he averaged 14.5 yards per reception, which is one of the higher percentages for those guys, averaging 85 targets or more last season from PFF. What I like about him, a lot of things, is he got better. While statistics necessarily improved last year, what you saw is he worked on a lot of nuances of the game, and he has taken a lot of trying to work on his craft. Does a great job of tracking the ball. Does a great job of keeping his hands down so the ball arrives, catches it over his shoulder, and locates it over the shoulder. Those are things that are kind of get you on the field down and get those big plays. But he also, to me, has some of that roster versatility. You talked about the inside-outside guy, a guy who can catch the ball close to the line of scrimmage, can make things happen, but also, like I said, can attack all 3 levels. Rock Taylor, to me, is a guy that I just think is kind of could be a third day guy, but starting to creep up people's boards more and more. Had a good showing at the Senior Bowl. Rock Taylor, to me, is one of those guys that I think I have right outside my top. Actually, I actually have him in my top 12. But is one of those guys that we talked about, last show or for the show. But a guy that I definitely was excited to talk about this part.
That's interesting to me because, I mean, this is a guy that he's talk about a sleeper. He's either a day 3 NFL pick or a lot of things have him not being drafted at all. So I don't even think you're even going to need to draft Brock Taylor in your rookie leagues. That might be somebody you're just picking up off the waiver wire. Doesn't concern you that he just flat out did not score touchdowns in his career?
No, if you look at how the receivers caught it in Memphis, basically they spread the ball. I mean, there was no receiver who had more than 6 touchdown receiving. I think 7 was the leader this previous season. So what they did is they threw the ball to lots of the tight ends, the running backs, and receivers. There wasn't a primary guy they looked for in the offense. It's not a pass-happy offense in Memphis. And a lot of people had Seth Hannigan as a sleeper quarterback. I did not. The reason was because he sucks.
Yeah.
And you actually absolutely see that when it comes to Rock Taylor.
Yeah, no, that couldn't agree more.
I completely agree, but that's just an awesome setup. The reason is he sucks.
He sucks. Oh man, Adam, who's your perimeter guy?
Perimeter guy. So it was tough because I had 2 guys for versatile, so I just picked one to be the perimeter guy. And to be fair, I put some thought into it and was like, I think you go down the field a little bit more. So that for me is Elijah Badger, out of
Florida.
Yeah, Florida. Sorry. I did really like Elijah Badger. He's a good athlete. He's someone who, again, did go down the field a lot. But having done so, caught the ball, like it didn't, have a drop issue at any capacity.
0 drops. Yeah.
Yeah. Someone who is definitely more long speed than quick. But I just liked his hands again going down the field. I thought he had, wasn't at a fully developed release package, but had, enough strength to where there was something he could figure out. He can play inside and outside. I think he was like a 70-30 split in college. Has been productive for a couple seasons, nothing crazy, but has, again, been productive. He's someone who, it's funny, I think at his best he can be extremely explosive, but he wasn't someone who always showed that. Just admittedly, but someone who I think the best of Elijah Badger is a really good wide receiver. It's similar to how I talked about Io Manor, but now we're talking about sleepers. Where the best of this player I think is really good. I just don't always see it. But he is someone who I'm not worried about that physicality quite as much. I see him as someone who would be more of a flanker slot than a true you're the alpha guy. But someone who can move around, can do a lot of the things, and you don't have to worry about the drops. He's again consistent with the hands, and I think that bodes well for one of these guys, especially as a perimeter guy. Just you can consistently move the chains. You get to where you're supposed to be. You catch the ball. Maybe it's not always the explosive play afterwards, but you're moving the chains, and that's what matters.
Yeah, I mean,
Adam.
go
God damn.
ahead, Chris. Sorry.
I was going to say, Adam. Also, add real quick. Far's offense was not, very productive for all receivers and the passing game in general.
No, and I was just going to say, like, well, he didn't have a pop year at any point in his career, but he had 3 solid production years. I mean, he, over 800 yards in 2022, 723, over 800 again in 2024, and is by far his most efficient year when he had 20 yards per reception. And not a bad 2.96 yards per route run that year either. The other thing I'll give him, and especially looking for sleepers, you're kind of looking for this, but he had a really good grade against man, 88.5. That puts him really up there in the percentile. So that those are things that you look for in sleepers. That could you pop? I think the answer is potentially for sure. Chase, who's your perimeter guy?
We've talked about all the perimeter guys I want to talk about, actually. And to be dead honest, you kind of stole the one guy that I might have wanted to talk about, because you stole my number 13 guy, Dan, in Isaac TeSlaa.
Yeah, well, good. You can shut up about him, so I could talk about him. By the way, Chase just hates perimeter guys because he's 5'5", so he can't.
So I A, was never going to be one, and B, it was hard as shiznit to defend one when as a cornerback in college too. I had to trying to guard the gray tape.
Imagine Chase trying to guard TeSlaa, who'd just be like jumping up like, I can't reach you.
No, I would have nailed him though.
Oh, more ways than one. But yeah, he's 6'4", 214. I had to throw that in there. It was just a little hanging fruit.
I got 3 kids, yo.
No, I like TeSlaa a lot. I mean, he came out, he ran the 4.43. He's a big guy. He made a lot of big time catches. I copped him the Cedric Tillman. I see a lot of similarities where there's going to need to be some refinement in his route running, but he has the hips to do it, or I don't really question that. And he's willing to do some of the dirty work too. Like he has a pretty good blocking grade and stuff like that. And I think that'll get him on the field as a perimeter guy, especially in these, we're seeing it more and more now, guys, like these offenses coming from that Shanahan tree where like they need the receivers to block. He's going to be able to be that type of guy and be able to take the top off the field. Like who's the bum on the Rams? Like Ben Skowronek, like he's an actual athletic Ben Skowronek with more upside is kind of how I see TeSlaa.
I think he's the guy Eric Decker is who he reminds me more of. Go ahead though.
I think he's more explosive than Decker was. I don't know if he'll ever be the route runner Decker was, but I do like kind of your point there of like he's going to be able to get on the field. He's going to be a true perimeter guy who can do all the.
Well, I don't.
It's a guy too. He started out smaller, worked his way, transferred up, and when he transferred up, his production, he still was able to produce and still was able to play at a high level, a relatively high level. He's a guy when I plugged him in. All of his metrics and his scores and his dominator rating and those kinds of things, he actually graded out with an average score in my top 5 in terms of how the scores came out. He's a guy that I really like. I think the sky could be the limit, but he's going to have to go someplace where they're not going to shove him on the field right away and ruin him.
Are you guys not worried that he didn't really play on the perimeter?
I was gonna say he's a big slot. That's what I thought. You guys were really like very insistent he's an outside guy. I think he played big slot most of the entire time.
it was like a 50-50 versatile thing. I mean, like his half of his production, or I'm sorry, 3/4 of production did come while he was in the slot, but on running plays, he was on the perimeter a lot, doing a lot of the blocking, and that's where I could see him getting on the field more consistently at the NFL level, given his type, because he's not going to be the guy. You kind of said Eric Decker. I don't see quite the hips where has the sinking power
Right.
that Decker has, so I don't think he's going to get to play big slot a lot in the NFL.
No,
But he does all the other dirty things where he gets to be on the perimeter. That's why I'm
See,
projecting him.
I think he's more of a pass, like an arm catcher, like Eric Decker. Where I see it, I get the breakdown, like he's not running a comeback like Eric Decker just did. But what he did is he plucks the ball high, keeps it high, uses his body like that. I was talking about the last show about basketball players. That's what I see TeSlaa is. He has a lot of basketball things. That's why I see him as a big slot. He did a lot of things the tight ends are good at. He's everything I think what Dalton Kincaid you guys want him to be. I think TeSlaa does a lot of those things. And to your point, Dan, where I do think he can get on the field in the West Coast systems is he definitely will be a blocker. So the Kendrick Bourne role, those different guys, the Jennings, he can kind of do a lot of those dirty work things as well. It's the outside part I'm a little curious about because his getting off press coverage, get people putting their hands on it, his bail up speed, all those things are things I kind of worry about for him, where I do think he has to kind of be inside.
I was gonna get to that where like his man coverage is not great, and that's something that it might hold him back from being able to really be a consistent producer that's going to last on your dynasty teams, but an athlete I like nonetheless. So who's a versatile guy you want to highlight, Chris?
Well, his teammate Andrew Armstrong. Andrew Armstrong was a guy who. One of the things I'll give you, he's definitely been in college for a while, but he's been a productive guy the last couple of years. PFF's third rated guy at 89.4, I'm sorry, receiving grade at PFF, which was third in his draft class. Had 2.81 yards per route run, but he also excels in shortage yards. So he's another guy like I talked about before. I can attack you on all three levels. A guy can get down the field with his size and his big, he's 6'3", 200 pounds, but he also can be a guy who can catch the ball. I saw that a lot in Arkansas, where there's a lot of their passing attack was within about 5 or 7 yards of the line of scrimmage. A lot of their quarterbacks suck as well. But Armstrong was able to kind of make up for that despite those things, and a guy who's a pretty good athlete overall. Like I think this is a guy that is that inside outside you guys talked about. He's able to do the dirty work. He'll block. He'll be able to line up side. And a guy that I did have Kendrick Bourne, where I think there's a lot of things that like Jawan Jennings, those type of guys where he will fit in a lot of these West Coast systems where he's going to do the dirty work, but also be a guy that can be where he's supposed to be to catch the ball short, long, or medium. So I think he's going to be a guy who's never going to be somebody, is going to blow up in fantasy, but I think this was a guy who could be a receiver 3 flex option for you down the road.
Chris is just filling up our taxi squads right now.
It's not going to be anything fantasy-wise, then I don't want it.
See, my thing for this, and we talked about this last week with the running backs, yes, with draft capital could change a lot of this stuff, but I'm going off of guys that I think you have ability to play in different systems in the NFL, and if you get a chance on the field, what can you do? And I think this is a guy that we talked about, a coach's guy. This guy will do all the little things. He'll get you first down. He's a chain mover. He's able to do the intricacies, and he's willing to block. And I think that's the things that get you on the field, and he has that inside-outside versatility.
Okay, all right. Adam, who'd you switch your guy? Because it was Elijah Badger, so who'd you switch it to?
Yeah, I switched it to because I was really struggling with an outside guy. There wasn't because I had Thornton in the last show. There wasn't
There's
like
not a lot
obvious,
in this draft.
Yeah, there wasn't obvious you are an outside purely guy. There's a lot of flanker slot guys. There's a lot of slot guys. Not a lot of pure outside. So, my other versatile guy who I like a lot is Ty Felton out of Maryland. He's someone who I mean I hate to use a cliche, but he genuinely has that dog in him. Like if I had an effort grade, he'd be up there for the best wide receiver in the class. The dude is fighting his ass off whenever he's out there. Look, I love it. I mean, he's a thinner guy. He's lanky, 6'2", 186, or thereabouts. But he plays way more physical than as frail as he is. And he gets down the field.
Ouch.
Frail, but he's rail thin. Like let's keep a spade a spade. Like he's thin, but he doesn't let it affect him really. Like he's someone who will fight through contact as a ball carrier. He's someone who becomes a runner after he catches the ball. I think he catches with his arms out. And which again, we talk about this with lankier guys, like
It's
that's
Justin Hunter, Travis Hunter's size, by the way. Go ahead.
Yeah,
It's the same size.
I don't
He
think
is.
he's got quite the feet speed that Hunter does to that point.
No.
But he is a really good athlete overall. Someone who I think tracks the ball well. Look, and he was incredibly productive this past season, and he's someone who has done a little bit of everything in the sense that when he was younger, he was coming on the field as that field stretcher. And then this past season, when Maryland needed him to be the guy that they drove their offense through, he was a guy who was getting like a 9-8 dot, right? They were just feeding him targets underneath, and he can do either. It's not just like, oh, I'm this guy that, I think this past season got 40% of his receiving yards between 0 and 9 yards. But that's not the story of his entire collegiate career. That's just what Maryland needed him to do this past season. He's gone down the field. And when he went back down the field this past season, he was great intermediate and down the field this past season. So he's someone who I like a lot. By the way, also a returner. So we talk about, needing some special team value. He's a guy who plays special teams. He's a guy who run blocks. Again, at 186, he might get thrown around a little bit, but he's going to try his ass off. He fights. Again, like I was just really impressed with the effort, and I think coaches will be too. And, he'll play slot, he'll play outside. He'll do whatever you let him. And I think that's going to show for coaches and hopefully get him on the field.
Can I just say that he's a LaRue process special in my book? This is like that is such an Adam receiver in so many ways. And Adam, I'm going to give you a lot of credit for both him and Badger because there's two guys that I didn't necessarily have higher on my board, but because of where you have them, I definitely went back and watched tape, and I definitely see they are LaRue process specials.
You didn't have room. You have Rock Taylor.
The guys. Well, Rock Taylor is somebody that's something a little different. Adam has those guys where they're good route runners, but do a little bit of everything. He has a good eye for that. And a lot of times I don't always value those guys when I first kind of look through, but he always kind of has a certain guys that wind up being like Elijah Moore's. I always reference back to think about where I watch it again and I'm like, I can see it. And he's definitely one of those felt one of those guys where I was like, I don't like the size, I don't like the touch is okay. But then when you go back and you watch it and you put it into context, he played really well.
Well, I mean, Adam, just to your point, like Pat, who we just had on in the first hour, I mean, he had Ty Felton in his top 12.
Yep.
So I mean, he's all on the same board. I look at Felton's definitely gonna get on the field, special teams. So this is definitely a candidate sleeper pick, but I hate his hands, and he had 8 drops. Like I don't think his eye coordination is necessarily the best. And to the point of getting thrown around, this guy is awful in contested catch situations. Despite that, he's not that short. He's a little taller, so I think he'd be a little bit better in that situation. But he's going to be on the field. He is an athletic specimen. If he can play predominantly slot, in my opinion, the NFL, I think he will get a legitimate shot. It's just going to depend on whether he gets that or not. But he is also somebody on the
check the ball well though.
Well, yeah, I think it was a lot of like focus stuff underneath. He definitely does have drop issues, but to that point, like thought tracking the ball, arms extended, he was pretty good. Through contact, agree with you, and there was some focus stuff underneath, but I thought tracking the ball, it worked out so you can have some versatility.
Well, and I was going to say too, mock draft wise, he's actually somebody who's been rising up. Like we're talking about early.
Well, scouts like him. He has got some visits.
Yeah. Like he's been rising up in the mock draft part too. So he might have some draft capital to go with it. Chase, who'd you have?
It's not Elijah Badger, but it's another Florida Badger. It's Chimere Dike, the ex-Badger who transferred and followed his buddy Graham Mertz down south when he went, and it actually worked out pretty well for him. I'm tempted to say, oh, well, you cut bait and ran at the wrong time. But, I mean, following Mertz was good for him. DK had a much better year this year than he probably would have over at Wisconsin because nobody really had all that good a year over at Wisconsin. Nobody on the football team, definitely. They were all the women athletes were the ones that had the good year this year at Wisconsin. But, I mean, a guy with an 87 athleticism score, that would have been good for 7th at the combine. I mean, this is a guy that just he jumps off the page that way at you if you really look into him and watch him play. He led Wisconsin in receiving before the transition from the old ways, 3 yards in a cloud of dust or 3 feet in a cloud of dust to the Luke Fickell era here. But then he came through this year and led Florida in receptions this year. He's a field stretcher. He's fast. He doesn't mind playing physical though. For a guy whose game could be more speed, he does like to play physical, and he will fight he will fight through man coverage. He will fight through Guys attacking him at the point of attack for contested catches there. He's got good acceleration. I think he does a good job finding the soft spots in zones. He's smart enough to find where that is, take that ball, and then use that speed after he gets a hold of it there. And the coolest thing about it is he can line up inside, outside, backfield. He can line up all over the place, but he's not a gimmick player. He is versatile. You can use him anywhere you want him. So you combine the idea of speed with being able to play anywhere on the field. He's got punt return experience, which helps, which is nice. Like I said, when he gets that ball in his hands. So Chimere Dike guy there with a 110 speed score is nice. Anytime you get up over about that part there, you're talking about a guy that for his size can move. He's 6'1", 195, so he's not built like a tank, but he's also not the guy that we were just talking about either. So he's going to be able to use that physicality that he likes to play with. There's a guy at Wisconsin that caught 6 touchdowns and 689 yards, and I know that doesn't sound like a whole hell of a lot, but you're talking about, like I said, old school Wisconsin, where it was a bunch of corn-fed Midwest guys on the offensive line, a Florida or New Jersey running back every year, and a quarterback that probably shouldn't have been playing D1 every single year. This is a guy that still went out and actually produced at Wisconsin. Then, like I said, went down to Florida and still performed in the SEC. So Chimere Dike, guy that I think might have something.
Yeah, and the year you're talking about, I mean, that was the sophomore year on top of it, so
Yeah.
it's not nothing. It's not nothing to sneeze at either. Yeah, I like that one too. So my guy is I love this guy. It's Kyle Williams. He's in my top 12. I actually just moved my rankings.
Me
He's
too.
now my wide receiver 9 overall. So
10.
somebody we just get into talk about in the first hour. Somebody right now he's on the borderline of like being a high day 3, maybe even a low end day 2 pick. Like that 3rd, 4th round territory is looking like where he's being mocked at a lot of times. The 5'11", 190, solid enough size. I wish he didn't have a few less drops, but it's not terrible. He had 5 drops on the year. But this is a guy who he can run every route. He can beat you deep. He can run every route in between. He knows where he needs to be in space. Like you talk about those guys who he doesn't just run the route according to the play. He knows when to stop in that hole in the zone, make himself available to his quarterback, make himself a safety blanket, but also has the speed to get deep. Ran a 4.4, was able to prove that, a nice solid 2.71 yards per route run. Half of his, or a little more than quarter of his production came from the slot. So kind of shows you his versatility there. And he was 24th in deep yards, 10th in deep catches. So the guy can just do a little bit of everything. And I think he is going to get significant enough draft capital. I comped him to Rashad Bateman. See a lot of similarities between him and Rashad Bateman as far as how they play the ball. And with the Bateman thing, it's probably more of what Bateman became necessarily than what he was as a prospect. I don't have as high of a grade on Kyle Williams I did as Bateman as a prospect, but what Bateman kind of became, I think a Kyle Williams can do a lot of the similar type of things. I think he will be a starter in
I
this
think he's
league.
More what?
I think he's more explosive than Bateman. Like that's what I think he brings a little more.
Yeah, he absolutely is. Yeah.
It doesn't take much, but yeah.
Well, I guess that's what kind of threw me a
I
little bit.
like Rashad Bateman, but come on. I mean, play some football, dude.
It does help when you're on the field. That does play a role for sure. All right, so last group to talk about here in the slot category. Who's somebody we wanted to highlight there, Chris?
Well, first of all, I love Kyle Williams. Yeah, and that's definitely a guy I think is very explosive. That's what I like about him. I think he could be a slot and outside guy, and I think this is going to be. I talk about comfortable and just seeing where he's supposed to be and settling. He reminds me a lot of Tank Dell in a way where he's able to attack the ball in the air, make things happen. A lot of those drops he talked about was him trying to turn too fast and make something happen with the ball before he had the ball. It wasn't necessarily I'm not holding through or even physicality of somebody.
He wants the whole offense. So yeah, he was trying to put that offense on his back.
Can I just throw this out there? I think in this class, genuinely in a scramble drill, he was one of, if not my favorite receiver.
He does.
He ad libs with the best of them.
That goes to the instinct thing I was talking about. Like he just has natural instincts to find a hole.
Yeah. So we'll talk about natural instincts and the ability to find. Look, Xavier Restrepo is my slot guy. I have him as number 13 on my board, just outside.
Going down to you.
Restrepo is a guy that has been had all kinds of different quarterbacks. Talk about quarterbacks from the last 2 shows and what guys had to play through. The U has just churned out all kinds of different quarterbacks between injuries, different guys being in and out of the thing, and no matter who it was, Restrepo produced. And the big knock on him, and I just want to kind of attack the knock more so because I think everybody gets the fact that he had a high grade, had good statistics, definitely was a slot guy that can be very productive. Isn't going to be an outside guy, not where I ever asked him to be, but a guy that had averaged 16 yards per catch. So we look at we question what he is, and his 40 was not good. It don't happen on the whole pro day thing. But I will also point out Emeka Buka never ran his 40, so we don't know what Emeka Buka's 40 is. But I talked about earlier that he caught 5 balls over 25 or 5 balls over 30 yards the entire season. Only had 6 attempted to him, or 8 attempted to him. I'm sorry. Restrepo averaged 16 yards per catch, and as PFF middle intermediate routes, I should say, was a guy that. Give me 1 second. He caught 22 intermediate passes, which led everybody in this draft, for 458 yards, which was third most in this draft. Of those, he had the most yards after catch and yards after contact. I bring that up because we keep knocking on his speed, we keep knocking what he's able to do, but if a guy's explosive, he averaged 16 yards per catch. He scored with no matter who the quarterbacks were. He's able to get in out of his breaks. He's able to open. This isn't a guy to me who's Jake Bobo or somebody like that we're talking about earlier. This guy is actually a guy who I think could be a slot receiver, and you're not going to ask him to stretch the field. But in a slot role as a Julian Edelman type of guy, in today's league at 209, 5'10", he can block and he can play that slot receiver and kill you in option routes all day long. So to me, we talk about one of those guys that are PPR machines. If I'm in a full point PPR, I love Restrepo.
Well, first of all, it's Restrepo.
That's what
I was
I
laughing at.
wasn't anything,
We
but
couldn't have an episode of this
Nate,
show.
you had to
without-
say, you should have corrected me because that's what Adam threw me off because I said it wrong and I was like, I'm saying it wrong still somehow.
No, you just pulled the Trump thing. I'm doubling down until you believe his name.
We-
his name is Restrepo.
we can't have an episode of this show without Chris butchering
I
it.
know.
I'm sorry, but
It's all good. It's all good.
Well, Chase, you are here. He called Quinshon Quentin Jenkins last week. Or like, who the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
listen, the analysis is on point. Sometimes the names are a little
It's not like it's not John Travolta levels of screwing up the name. I mean, Quentin Jenkins, Quinshon Judkins, that's close.
Same as
More of a memory thing, guys. I have a lot of different quarterbacks and different running backs and receivers and names in my head, and I have to sit there and go through to be like, oh, what's the initials again? What's the name?
Look, it's way more important to remember what they're good at and what they're not than
Restrepo's never gonna know that we mispronounced his name because he's still running to catch up to what we've been talking about here.
he's still trying to get a better helm in the 40s.
Listen, I'm 5'5", I weigh 220 pounds, and I'm 47 years old, and I can outrun Xavier Restrepo in a 40 right now, and I will.
Did you average 16 yards per catch?
No, because I played D-back. and they didn't average that against me either. So, yeah, he's a tough dude, I guess, and he's definitely a football player, and he played at the U, which I did not do.
I'm asking you the numbers wise though, because you guys are going off the numbers, and that's where I feel like if we're going to go analytics numbers outside the 40, what is he doing that shows you on the field that he can't produce?
He's a football player. I don't think I just don't know if that translates to the NFL when he's running through molasses.
Julian Edelman ran a 4.73.
Yeah, I
Not
mean,
a 4.86.
I mean, Chris, I'm more on your side than not. I do have Restrepo as my wide receiver 16, somebody who, one, is definitely going to be drafted at some point in day 3. 2, definitely is a good route runner, definitely commands the slot. Is he only going to be a slot only player? Yeah, I mean, that's what we're talking about in the slot only category here. But he lands on a team who plays a lot of 3 receiver sets. I don't see a reason why Restrepo's not going to find a way onto the field unless he's just in some stock locked and loaded, wide receiver room by somebody he gets drafted by. So I mean, I'm with you on that. He does all the little things really, really, really well.
My question is historically, who averaged 16 yards at a catch at a slot receiver? Like how often does that happen? And
I would imagine not often, but
leading intermediate for that guy that supposedly isn't very explosive. If you're commanding that middle of that field, Dan, we know that's where you can eat today. That 10, 12,
Oh,
15
agreed.
yards you can eat. So that's where I'm like, I get that he doesn't have the 40 speed, but that doesn't show up on the tape when it comes to what you're going to ask him to do. And I think that's where I feel like more confident in him than a lot of other receivers, because I think it's not going to be twisted what you're going to ask him to do. They're going to let him be Julian Edelman. They're going to let him be Wes Walker. They're going to let him just be an option route guy. They're not going to go and like, hey, we want you to run slot fades.
I think he's a football player. I think he is a football player. And generally, I like those guys. And I'm not saying that Xavier Restrepo can't carve out a career for himself in the NFL. What I'm saying is I don't necessarily see it being such where he's some kind of fantasy usable asset.
Why couldn't he be Puka? Just as a shorter version. What was Puka's physical profile? What's Puka's physical profile?
Puka's much more physical as a runner. One like that's not even really comparable as far as your physicality.
He's more physical as a runner?
As a runner, absolutely. Much thicker, much more physical, breaks much more tackles. That's not really that's not even comparable.
I don't have those numbers in front of me to show me that Puka or what the numbers were for Rexpo's tackles
I
broken.
don't,
But the build and how he runs, like he's a little bowling ball out there. I don't think he's someone like dude that's
his build, yeah. But
Puka Nacua has been a exception to the rule too in a lot of ways. He wasn't necessarily.
That's my point. I don't think Respo is like I don't love every 4.84 guy, or 5'10" guy.
Oh,
but like he only had 12 missed tackles like that. It's okay. It's not great.
Shit.
Hey, come back, Chris.
Take your Restrepo and go.
I did not make Chris's drink tonight. I just want that to know. I am a entire time zone away.
But he's cut off either way, regardless who's serving.
I'm up on a bar stool too, so this is a comparatively much larger fall for me, being 5'5".
The chair collapsed. It just dropped down.
Gone. He's out.
You're gonna start a GoFundMe to get Chris some office furniture.
Adam, who's your slot guy? Well, Chris, listen, buddy, I'm right there with you on guys who got killed by the combine, and right there with you through it. I like Restrepo a lot, and I how often am I really asking my slot receiver to run straight down the field? I don't, whatever. But anyways, for me, it's Tez Johnson. He was someone who, like, pre-combine was one of my top receivers. Like, I love Tez Johnson. Look, and I did have to knock him for the combine, but we're gonna be realistic about this. Like, it sucks that he ran a 4.5 and he is small as shit. Like, let's get it out of the way. Like, that's tough. But what we also need to talk about is why was, like, a month prior, not even, he was unguardable at the Senior Bowl, like putting dudes on their ass. Like, so for me, it's just like, okay, cool. I know I can't run you in a straight line, and that sucks. And it does mean that you are going to be strictly a slot guy. But I'm not going to kill your NFL career because I've seen you get open on NFL corners within, like, literally weeks of the event that you didn't run well at. And the other part of it for me is this is a guy who, again, like, his A-dot was short. Like, this is a guy who's doing his work underneath anyways. And he's using his short area quickness, which, by the way, did have the best shuttle by a decent margin in this draft class at the combine. So it's not like he was a bad tester in general. Margin. He is not a bad athlete in general. He is a bad 40-time guy. And someone who made up ground at the end of his 40, which is weird for a guy his size. It was like his 10-yard split was... Like, his 10-yard split's actually worse than his overall 40 percentile, which is really weird for a guy his size, and it kind of makes me wonder if he just didn't. We talked about
a bad start or something, because usually if you're quicker than fast, generally your 10-yard split should be awesome.
But to me, that was the red flag. I like Tez still. I mean, cut you off, but that's the red flag where I had for him. Where it was like, are you really that athletic? Because your yards per catch weren't great, and I'm starting to see that maybe you weren't as fast as I think.
But that's the thing, he's a short guy, and if he can run that kind of a shuttle, I mean,
the agility's there. The agility's there.
The agility's there, but the other part of it is the explosive stuff, like his vertical and broad jump. He has a 97th percentile broad jump, and he has an 82nd percentile vertical. So, like, if your get off is good and your agility is good, then what the hell happened in the 40? Like to me, it's like I just think that went weird. I think it's Chase, to your point in the last show, where it's like, okay, the guy who's been playing football the whole time, maybe he just hasn't been on the track and he doesn't have a good
Right.
start. Like I don't know. I don't know that that's quite representative. I don't think he's a blazer either. Like
But
to be clear,
when
but
you
I
watch
don't think
him on
he's a
film,
4-5 guy.
Adam, when you watch him on film, does he look like a guy who's not getting off the line with burst?
No, I think he gets off the line fine. I like look. Obviously, he's a slot
Dan
guy.
wants to say something.
But I mean, I think he's quick. I think he moves light on his feet. I
I
don't
think
think
he's agile, quick though. That's where I agree with you, but I think that's where for me the speed is the choppiness. He doesn't get off fast because he's so short and so choppy that he doesn't get up the field fast enough. And that's where, like, yes, he can laterally move real quickly, but I question how fast he's going to take you into your route, especially when they put their hands on you.
Yeah, and to be fair, like I think if you put your hands on him, he's done. But at that point, then like coverage wise, you should be checking into a run anyways because you've got a nickel on your small guy. Like I don't know. To me, it's just I think he should be a matchup advantage from the slot where you are really quick. You should be beating safeties or linebackers to the flat. You should be able to get yards after the catch there, and like you're really quick. You get open, you run routes well, you don't have a drop issue. I know you did the season prior to this last one, but it seemed pretty cleared up and you got enough volume that I'm willing to trust the 1 year sample on this one. I know for a lot of guys, I'm not really willing to trust a 1 year sample, but when you catch the ball, like you get 100 targets, like
Maybe he worked on it. Yeah.
like so for me it's just like, look, he's a slot only guy. There's only so much ceiling, but to completely kill the NFL career, like he's not even necessarily a bad athlete, he's just a bad 40 runner. I'm not going to disagree with you that his down the field speed isn't great, but I don't want you running down the field routes anyways. I literally want you to go like, hey, see that linebacker that they've just lined up a chronic, like punish that, like go get out to the flat, beat him there, and you're going to almost every time.
I need you to get down a little bit of depth for just a little
Yeah,
depth for that.
I need you to get at least 10, 12 yards and get off the line. I think that was my big thing of like, I can't judge how quick he is getting off the line because he never played against press man coverage. Like he always had a free release every time they lined him up in Oregon. It's just how they played him. And I'm not saying that, that means one way or another, but the other thing too is like, he's literally the only player in the draft coming up that I couldn't comp to anybody. There's nobody to comp him to because you're running a 4.5 and you're like the smallest thing I've ever seen in my entire
154 pounds.
Yeah, like it's a bad combination to have.
And again, like he felt like literally 10 spots on my list. Like I'm not saying that I didn't knock him, but like it's just like, look, he produced in college, he produced in the Senior Bowl. Like at a certain point, like I've seen the guy win against NFL players. So like I can't kill the idea. I'm not saying that he's a lock, but I can't kill it.
Where I'm with you 100% is that I definitely moved him back up my board since after the reaction to the post combine thing, in a sense where like, okay, I was all disappointed when I saw the combine. I moved him down. I moved him back up because I was like, he still gets separation. He still gets open. My problem is that like, look, I use like a Rondell Moore, Dan. You're talking about comps. Rondell Moore, Tavon Austins, those kinds of guys are smaller. The problem for me is they actually had the 40 speed. They actually were fast.
Right.
He doesn't even have that. And the quickness, the lateral quickness, they're not going to scheme. They're going to scheme it up so you can make somebody miss. But if you can't make people miss and you can't get down, like you can't beat a quick slant. That's where I see that. I don't see him get off the field real quick. I see the quickness come in the hips. I could beat you in an option route all day. That's what we live everybody in the Senior Bowl on. But I can't getting off the line. How fast I get into my route. I did see that even with as Dan talked about, nobody fucking blocking him at all. And Chase talked about the other guys' releases. I don't know if it's a stutter thing in Oregon or teaching him to do, but he don't burst into his routes. And that's why I wasn't surprised when I saw his split in the 40. I was like, you could kind of see that on tape. He don't burst into his, like Tank Dell to me, you saw him burst out off the line.
Yes.
Like you just see it. And most of those quicker little short guys, you just see them and like, oh. Now the soccer player quick guys, which is I think he kind of is more like, they have I could beat option routes. Chippy. I do think he can live like that. You can be a Julian Edelman, like I said, or Wes Walker. You can live like that. But the toughness, I don't see that same toughness. And that's where I'm like, dude, you're littler, and I don't know if you're not going to get hurt.
But I think with his size,
or for people out there who don't know what we're talking about, when I reference speed score, it's basically a measurement of your size, your overall size versus how fast and how quick you are. And he had the lowest speed score, 71.4, lowest speed score of any of the guys that I ranked, which is a problem when you're 154 pounds. In theory, a guy who's 5'10", 154 should be quick, should be fast. And in a 40, and in a guy who has shown quickness in his movements, you should think that he could get up to speed faster and thus have a better 40 time. And just the combination there is 154 pounds, dude. He's going to get pounded. And if he's not getting off the line in the NFL, and if he's not getting open, I don't know how often they're actually going to toss the ball at him, which is my hang up on him. Now, last time we kind of discounted a tiny little guy from Oregon. It worked out pretty good for us this past season in Bucky Irving, but 2 different positions and 2 different usages. So.
Yeah, sure. Chase, who's your slot guy?
My slot guy. This is a guy that I may be kind of putting into the slot or saying that I think he's a slot guy. And it's a guy that on our last episode, Pat Fitzmaurice talked about it here, and Nick Nash, he stole him from me. But it is a guy that I think has some potential here at the next level if he can get in the right situation. Yes, he's 37 and a half years old. And yes, he's not the fastest. He ran a 4.57, but 4.57 isn't 4.86. But yeah, Nick Nash from San Jose State, the converted quarterback. And when you watch him play, I think that intelligence, that football IQ, the idea that he can see the field, he understands what's happening in front of him in the field. He can read coverages and know how and understand intuitively how to attack those coverages helps him as a receiver. I think that comes through in the way that he plays. And in fact, I think he outplays his athletic limitations. And he has athletic limitations, in my opinion, vis-a-vis the idea of being a wide receiver. As a quarterback, he'd be all kinds of athletic.
He can get up, though. He can jump.
Yeah.
He is.
No, he can't. No, he's an athlete. Compared to other wide receivers, some of his metrics don't pan out great. I talked about speed score. He's got a speed score of only 95, which again, like I said, I'd like to see those guys up over 106, 107, up in that range. But this is a guy who, once he made the switch from quarterback to receiver, immediately took off as a receiver. There was not really a ramp up period for him once he made that switch. He just took right off. He's a guy that identifies those coverages, like I says, and then he leverages that to find open spots in zone. I think you watch him play and he adjusts his routes on the fly to help his quarterback. And knowing what a quarterback wants to see out there, knowing what a quarterback would like you to do as a receiver, I think helps him specifically as a receiver make those kinds of adjustments. He's got a good frame. He's 6'3". He's only 203, which is a little bit light maybe for that size, for that height. But I think he's got the room to put on that size in the NFL. He tracks the ball well, which you could talk about his football intelligence from that way, but there's a lot of guys who understand football who don't necessarily track the deep ball well and don't necessarily make those kinds of adjustments en route like he does there. He's a raw talent. We talked about it in the last episode. He's a raw talent, but I look at him as a raw talent as in raw materials. Like there is stuff there to work with. And I think that the right team, the right staff, the right wide receiver room could make him a really fun player. So Nick Nash.
Remind me of Chris Hogan in a lot of ways, Dan. Remember Chris Hogan? You guys remember Chris Hogan?
Oh, yeah.
Chase, I'm going to say one thing I like about him too, Chase. He goes up and gets the ball, and then where he reminds me of that, Ricky Purcell did that last year. I stood out. First thing I watched Ricky Purcell stood out for me last year was like, oh, that guy goes and gets the ball. That's one thing that you can see his volleyball background. You can see that he has my biggest concern for him is he played college for about 6 years. He said like 37 and a half. There's definitely things he needs to still work on as a receiver.
Yes.
And as a fantasy owner,
learning
like 29, 30 when that happens, because it's like David Valle, where I like Valle a lot last year, but now he's like 28, and you're like, shit, you only have so much for you have to get your kind of prime out of those guys.
You personally, in this episode, just a few minutes ago, though, brought up another guy who was a converted quarterback who turned out to be a pretty damn good slot receiver in the NFL, and Julian Edelman. Now, I don't know that he'll ever be Julian Edelman, but there is precedent there for, like I said, a guy who switches from quarterback to receiver and then learns it damned well. He's not. I don't necessarily know that he's quite the athlete that Edelman is, but we referenced it before. He led them in just about every statistical, meaningful statistical category in receiving last year. The man didn't make the switch, and he's a man. He's not 37 and a half, by the way, everybody. He's more like 24 and a half, but which is still old for a draft pick. But the guy just made this switch a couple years ago. There is still a developmental arc. There's still a career arc to be had here with him. It's not ideal that some of that arc is going to have to happen in the NFL that you would have liked to have seen happen his junior and senior year of college, but there's something to be had there. There really is. He's a football player. Again, he's a football player, and I think if he gets in the right position, the right spot in the draft, then we might be talking about an actual fantasy asset rather than just a guy who's a nice, fun football player to watch. Dan didn't want to hear any of that, so he's gone. But you guys feel free to chime in on Nick Nash or move the conversation.
Like I said, I like Nick Nash. That's definitely a guy I'm high on or higher on. But my question, where I am as a football player analyst in scouting, that's what we talked about last week, Chase, is that I kind of start off with that is what do I see you as a football player? Then I go to the fantasy part.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the fantasy part is where I struggle is that, okay, I like a lot of things, but I don't think you're an outside guy. Maybe you can be an outside guy eventually, but you're definitely going to slot receiver to start off with.
Yep.
And with that, the draft capital that goes with you, you're going to be a guy that has to catch on fast because if you're going to be a 5th or 6th rounder, you're going to be somebody they're looking to replace next year. You don't have the weapons, you don't have whatever. Now, what I do think is if he gets on the field, I think there's a lot of things that the quarterbacks will like about him, that he'll be a guy that if he plays a good quarterback, he would definitely excel. I think he'd be a great fit, even though they keep signing receivers in Miami, because I think for like a Tua, for example, he's a guy that in the red zone, Tua can throw high for and he can go get it in the slot. That's one thing I do see he has some fantasy potential with his ability to go get the ball, especially at big slot position. That can be valuable sometimes.
Edelman was a 7th round pick, by the way, I believe. So I mean, yeah, late draft capital.
Yeah, Bill Belichick's North Carolina, but hopefully
we've kind of talked about it before. That like my idea of it is like, I think sometimes we put way too much emphasis on the draft capital because every year 3rd round picks get cut from the team that draft them, before they even see the field in a regular season game. But I mean, the blueprint is there for a guy switching from a collegiate quarterback to a receiver and being, Ohio State quarterback that, he was a hell of an athlete, crazy athlete, but Ohio State quarterback.
That's who you're thinking of?
Who?
Terrell Pryor.
Yes, Terrell Pryor. Terrell Pryor had some success as a receiver.
He ran a 4.4, but yeah.
Yeah, he ran a 4.4, and I said Nick Nash runs a 4.5, 4.57, a low 4.5, but I just I had a note too to the point that you made about going up and getting the ball and fighting for the ball. I didn't mention it, but yeah, my note specifically says outplays his athletic limitations wide receiver wise through his football intelligence and his competitive nature. The dude he wants it. He wants to make this work. He wants to be a wide receiver. He wants the football. He wants to win football games. And I think he's got enough there to make that work. Now, will he be a fantasy asset? I hope so someday. I'm not going to have
the right system. It could, like I said.
Yeah.
All right, we'll cap it there. We'll cap it right there. So we'll be back next week. We're talking about tight ends, Pete Nova, fantasy face off. We'll get into all of it then as well. Can't wait, guys. Make sure you're checking out Operation Domination Football on your favorite podcast app, and we'll see you guys again soon.